One of the best ways to enjoy all of that beautiful summer fruit is to make a Freeform Summer Tartlet. It's so easy to put together. And the only thing that I can think of that's better than one big one is two small ones, because you get more of that outside crust and it's made just for you. Really easy to make, and I'm going to show you how to whip together the dough. Now, we're using an all butter dough here because guess what? We like butter. It just tastes great. But we're going to use a little bit of a different technique to get some beautiful flaky layers. So I'm going to start off by measuring my flour. Always a good idea to weigh your flour instead of measuring it by volume because it's just that much more precise. Now I'm looking for 3 3/4 ounces of all-purpose flour. So that's going to be somewhere in between 3.7 and 3.8 on this scale. There we go. And now this is going to go into a food processor. We're going to add a little bit of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of table salt. It's just going to dissolve nice and easy in there. And then I'm going to combine these two very quickly. That's it. Now I just need to get the butter. All right, this is 5 tablespoons of unsalted butter. I've cut it into these small pieces, about 1/2 inch in size. That way they will incorporate into the flour more easily. We want these really nice and cold, so I put them into the freezer to make sure that they're very, very chilled. So I'll scatter these pieces over our flour mixture. There we go. Lid goes on, and now I'm going to pulse this about 8 to 10 pulses. We're going to look for that butter to be incorporated in there with pieces no larger than a small pea. All right, always be mindful of where the blades are, but you can see that the butter is really worked into the flour at this point. That looks great. So now we can add our water, and we're using ice water here. Again, we want this to stay really nice and cold so that the butter doesn't melt. I'm going to start off with a tablespoon of ice water. Just add that right in there. I'm going to give it a quick pulse. So I'll probably add between 2 to 3 tablespoons of ice water in here, pulsing in between each time. And what we're looking for is the dough to start to come together. Let's see if the 3rd tablespoon does it. So I can see the pieces starting to come together just a little bit. Now if I go in there and I pinch them together, you can see that they actually stick together in a big flake. That is perfect. So with mini pie doughs, at this point you would just bring it together into a disc and then wrap it in plastic and chill it. But we're going to do an extra step to ensure some beautiful flaky thin layers of butter. I want to lightly flour my countertop here. All right, so that looks good. And now I'll go ahead and dump this out onto my countertop. And that just looks like a pile of crumbs at this point, but it really isn't. So what I'm going to do is kind of mush it together into a really rough rectangle here. About 8 inches by 3 inches is what we're looking for. And I'm going to do something called frissage. Now, frissage is a French technique, and it's where you smear the dough in increments so that it creates these beautiful flaky layers. And it's not a really big movement. We're just going to start at the end and start to smear, and then work your way back. All right, so now I'm going to move all this back together, flour the bench again. And again, we're going to do this one more time, about an 8 by 3 inch rectangle. I just want to bring this together because at this point, I want to divide it in half because we're making tartlets for 2. So I'll shape these into 3-inch discs and then wrap them nice and tight in plastic. These are ready for the fridge. I'm going to let them sit in there. You want to give them a good hour in the fridge so that the flour can hydrate fully. But these can stay in the fridge for up to 2 days, or you can put them in the freezer and let them go for 2 months. I'm going to opt for the fridge. We have some well-chilled dough here. So it's spent an hour in the fridge, and now it's time to roll these out. I'm going to grab some of my bench flour, but I'm not going to roll this out right on the counter. Instead, I'm going to roll this out between 2 sheets of parchment. Now, I've cut half sheets of parchment in half again, just because I like to do that with these little tartlets. Just going to flour the parchment here. Dough half goes on, flour the top, and another sheet right on top. So we're going to roll this out to about 7 inches round. And at first, I'm just going to rock the rolling pin back and forth a little bit to get this started into a round. Now, you can also roll this out on the countertop if you want, but this dough is a little bit moist, so it might stick. And you might have the tendency to add a little bit too much flour. As I've worked it, I'm just rotating the disc. And you can see I can really get this rolled out without adding too much flour. I'm going to give you a little peek and see what's going on there. Okay? That doesn't look very round. I'm going to work on that side. And it's okay if the edges aren't perfect. If your edges really aren't perfect, you just call it a rustic freeform tartlet. That looks spot on. There we go. So now I'm going to keep this between sheets of parchment and put it on a rim baking sheet, and then we'll do the second round. Just like the first one, out to a 7-inch circle. I'm going to put it right on top of the first one I rolled out and put this back in the fridge. You want to let it sit in there for at least 15 and up to 30 minutes. It's time for the fun part. We get to fill these tartlets with fresh summer fruit. Now, I took the shells out of the fridge. You keep them in the fridge for more than an hour, they're going to be a little too hard to fold. So I'm letting them sit here at room temperature just for a few minutes while I work on the fruit. We're using a combination of stone fruit and fresh berries. Now you can use apricots, peaches, plums. I'm using nectarines today. And these are beautiful. You can actually smell them. They have a little bit of a fragrance. And if I just press them, they press just gently. I can make a little bit of an indent, but you don't want to use too ripe nectarines. Otherwise, you're going to end up with nectarine applesauce, which is not good. So I need 8 ounces of fresh nectarines. That's probably a little less than 2. There's a couple different ways that you can pit a nectarine. I'm going to go around from the equator, and this is going to make it a lot easier for me to get the pit out. So already it's easier to hold, and it just comes off like that. Now, to get this little clingstone out, all I have to do now is cut this way, and they just pop right out. So easy. So now I'm going to cut these about a 1/2 inch thick. I'm going to use a paring knife since I've got relatively small wedge here. All right, that's easy. Into the bowl these go. I mentioned fresh berries. We're using blackberries here. This is about 2.5 ounces or a 1/2 cup. And these are blackberries, obviously, but you can use blueberries or raspberries. We're going to add these in here, and this is really nice because you have the sweetness from the nectarine, the tartness from the blackberries. Perfect combination. Because a little bit of sugar goes a long way, I'm going to start off with 2 tablespoons and toss these again. It's okay if the sugar doesn't fully dissolve, no problem. I'm going to taste one of these. These are really spot on in terms of sweetness. If they had been a bit more tart, I might have added another tablespoon of sugar, but don't need to. That's all we need to do with the fruit. Let me move this off to the side and bring up my 2 little discs. I'll get rid of these papers. All right. So now you want to mound the fruit in the center and leave about 1.5 inches of a perimeter around the sides. And when I say mound, it's better to place them on there, I think. You don't have to be too precious about it. All right, that's looking pretty good. I better save a little bit of room for those blackberries. So let's add those in too. Oh, I love it when they fall into the little nooks. So now I'm going to bring the sides up into the tart itself. Now, as I do that, I want about 1 inch of space between the edge of the fruit and where this comes over. So I'm only going to have to fold this over by about 1 inch. And then as I go around, I'm just pleating the dough where I need to. And I'm going to press these. I'm going to go around and pleat, and then I'll go back and press them all, just to make sure that the dough stays up. So the pleats are about every inch, maybe 2 inches. Really, there are no rules at this point. It's Thunderdome. All right, so I'm going to go back and just pinch the pleats together so that they stick, but I don't want to pinch them and press them onto the fruit. These are looking mighty fine. Gorgeous. So now, all I want to do is add a little bit more shine and a little bit of enhancement to the crust so it'll be super crisp. So I've got some water here. Just brush the outer edge. And now I'm going to add another tablespoon of sugar and just start sprinkling it all over. Just the edge, really. If some gets on the fruit, I'm not going to tell. So these look absolutely gorgeous. Now, I'm going to pop these into a 400-degree oven, and we'll let them bake in there for about 40 to 45 minutes. I'll rotate the pan halfway through baking. But as these bake, the fruit is going to slump and kind of give up their ghost, and the juices are going to come out. Maybe a little bit of spillage on the pan, but that's totally fine. Oh, beauties. Look at those. All bubbling and juicy and really hot. So obviously I'm not going to eat it right now. We're going to let these firm up a little bit, stay on the sheet pan for about 10 minutes. Then I'll slide them onto a rack, release them from their parchment, and let them cool down for another 20 minutes, just so those juices thicken up a bit. We are so close to the end. All we really need to do is gild the lily with a little bit of whipped cream. You could also use ice cream, whatever floats your boat. So I've got a chilled bowl here, just took it out of the fridge, and a chilled whisk. Now, the chilled bowl and the chilled whisk are great because the colder that the cream is and the bowl is and the whisk is, it's going to whip up a little faster and a little easier. So we're going to add about a 1/3 cup of heavy cream. Don't really need to measure it. Make as much cream as you want. About a teaspoon of sugar and a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. I'm just going to move my whisk back and forth. And you can see when the whisk starts leaving a trail behind, it's getting close to soft peaks at that point. All right, so that looks great. We're not looking for stiff peaks here, so nice soft cream. Let's plate a beautiful little tartlet for me. And a nice, beautiful dollop of soft whipped cream. That looks great, maybe a little bit more. That looks pretty enough to eat. Don't mind if I do. The juices in there have thickened up a little bit. Again, I let it cool for another 20 minutes after I took it off the parchment. And really, you can let these cool even longer. Great to make ahead. So I'm going to put a little bit of cream right on top there. There we go. A petite little wedge there. That's a mouthful. Amazing. Sweet nectarines. You get a little bit of that tartness from the blackberry, but the whole thing is not overly sweet, and the pastry is so flaky. It's really tender, incredibly buttery. That's about as good as summer gets. And the best part is, this is for 2. So after you finish this one, you get to eat the other one. Now, if you want to make this at home, remember these 3 keys. Frissage the dough, sugar the fruit right before baking, and pleat the dough loosely. So from America's Test Kitchen at home, Freeform Summer Fruit Tartlets for 2. This one's for me, that one's for you.
Thanks for watching. You can get all of the recipes from this season, along with our product reviews and more at our website, americastestkitchen.com/TV. Thanks for watching America's Test Kitchen. What'd you think?
Well, leave a comment and let us know which recipes you're excited to make, or you can just say hello.
You can find links to today's recipes and reviews in the video description.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
See you later.
I'll see you later.